Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Ushanka Show, stories about life in the Soviet Union. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи! В эфире программа Ushanka Show. In today's video, we're going to continue our conversation about military service in the Soviet Army, and I'm going to answer a couple of questions that were popping up for years now on my channel. In the last 9 years since I began Ushanka Show, I made quite a few videos on the topic of military draft, military service, and I combined it all in one long format video called about military service in the USSR. So just in case if you missed it, link will be in the comment section below. If you follow my channel, you may remember that I was born in 1971, and in the Soviet Union, like many other countries, boys were drafted at the age of 18. So my generation, boys born in 1971, was drafted into the military service in 1989, which means we were one of the last real Soviet generations, because boys born in 1973 were drafted in 1991, and that's the year when the Soviet Union collapsed. So they end up serving not in the Soviet army or finishing their military service in Ukrainian army or Russian army, Belarusian army, and so on. Which brings us to the first question that pops on my channel here and there. It's the question, did I serve in the military? No, I did not. And the main reason I was rejected by the military doctors due to my poor eyesight. I have a pretty bad short-sightedness, -7 right now. So even when we went to initial military health screening, I made a video about it already. In the 9th grade, they checked my eyes and basically they said, you are not good for military service in the peaceful time, and you can serve but not in the actual military during the wartime. In Russian, this verdict sounded like this: негоден в мирное время, годен к нестроевой службе в военное время. So I was good to dig trenches, so being a stroybot in case of war. Believe it or not, but initially I was quite upset because while I was still in school, I was kind of like, man, I want to join military, I want to be Navy. So I saw that, cruising the oceans, visiting different countries, watching sunsets and sunrises on the ocean. I probably sound like US Navy recruit now, but that was my vision, and I really wanted to be a Navy guy. And I told my military teacher in school, I have a video about it too, about initial military training in Soviet schools, and he had a little file for every boy in school, and he wrote down that I would like to be Navy, but of course it never happened because of my poor eyesight. Later on, I changed my mind about Navy, and it's kind of a funny story. So when I got into college, Kiev Polytechnical Institute, there was a guy in our group. He was the oldest dude, and he just finished the Navy. So of course I was all over him, asking for stories, his experience, and he was a nice guy. He told me a lot. And one time he mentioned something very interesting. Somehow he mentioned that in the bathrooms they had handles in the stalls, and in the Soviet Navy ships there was just a hole on the floor, so you squat over it. And I was confused, I was like, why do you need handles in the stall? And he looked at me like I'm stupid. Dude, when it's storming, you want to hold on, otherwise you're gonna fall in that hole. And I'm telling you, boys and girls, at that exact moment I completely lost interest to serve in Navy or serve in military, period. And the second reason why Soviet boys didn't get drafted is they went to college. And some colleges had so-called военная кафедра, military department. Then as long as you get in your degree in engineering or whatever, you also become an officer in reserve, and that lets you dodge the service. And I already made a video on this topic, how the guys in the Soviet Union who didn't want to serve used this loophole, going to specific colleges just for the purpose of not joining the military. And that's what one of my childhood friends did. He had zero interest of going to military, and he was 1 year older, so he was born in 1970. So he was looking for the college that had military cafedra and it was easy to get in. And he found one in the western Ukraine, in Ivano-Frankivsk. There was a oil and gas college, and he had like zero interest of ever becoming an engineer in oil drilling, but he went and got into that college for the sole purpose of dodging military service. Meanwhile, my two other friends failed to get into college. They passed the entry test but just didn't score high enough, and as long as they turn 18, Army snatched them up. And I think I need to remind you here that we went to school at the age of 7. We studied for 10 years, so we got out of the high school at the age of 17. So guys had only one try that spring when they're 17 to get into college. Otherwise, as long as they turn 18, Army will snatch them up. I also need to mention that if a college student gets kicked out of college for whatever reason, and usually poor grades, in no time he will get повестка, draft notice, and he will get drafted to the military service next seasons, because we had 2 drafts, one in the spring and one in the fall. So system worked really well. As long as you out of college, there'll be notice mailed to your local draft center. That person is available, the person lost its college shield, and you'll get drafted. I also got several questions like this one. Did you or someone you know serve in Afghanistan during Soviet-Afghan War? Okay, so once again, my generation got lucky because we turned 18 in 1989, and this is when the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan was completed. It began in May of 1988, and in February of 1989, the last troops left Afghanistan. So none of my friends or classmates went to Afghanistan, and I didn't know anyone who did, like from the older generation. And speaking of military draft, I also need to mention about Provody. So that was the goodbye party for the person that was living for 2 years if you go to Army, or 3 years if you go to Navy. And I went to quite a few of those because many of my friends got drafted. So I went at least 5 Provody parties, and it's just, you just go there and there's a food and alcohol, and you just kind of hang out and talk, have fun, and just saying goodbye to your friend. And it was quite a bizarre experience personally for me when a bunch of my friends and classmates just disappeared from my life for 2 years being drafted. But I stayed in touch with several of my friends. We were exchanging letters. They would send me their photos wearing their military gear, carrying AK-47s, and I would just send them letters, tell them about news, what's going on in the neighborhood. And of course, when they came back after 2 years of military service, one guy went to Navy. He served in the Far East in Vladivostok. There changed a lot. They spent time away from home, got new habits, a lot of bad habits. Quite a few guys started smoking while being in military. One guy who was the smartest guy in our class, Andrei, when he came back, he was dropping F-bombs left and right. It's just he got used to cursing so much. I remember my mom got quite upset because he was using our phone and he was talking to someone, and he was just using such a bad language that my mom just then chewed my ass, said, "Hey, tell your friend that he cannot talk like that. We have a little kid, my little brother, and he just cursing left and right." So that was quite embarrassing. Since college was free in the Soviet Union, there was no need for GI Bill or anything like that. But anyone who served in the military, they received a special, like a perk, that was less competition for them to get into colleges. They were like a special category. So as long as you pass successfully the test, doesn't matter how good your scores, you'll get accepted. So that's how, to my friends that couldn't get into colleges before the military, after 2 years they got in and they successfully graduated. Out of all my friends who got drafted, only one person served in a different country, in Poland, but location was horrible. They were like somewhere in the middle of nowhere in the forest, so he didn't see much, but he learned a little bit of Polish. I believe the best place to serve was Eastern Germany, DDR, and of course if people got lucky, they got sent to Cuba. That was the best exotic place. But also we had Soviet troops stationed in Hungary and Czechoslovakia and other socialist countries. There was no one in Yugoslavia, that's for sure. But otherwise, the rest of my friends, they served all over the Soviet Union. The furthest was of course Vladivostok, on the opposite side of the Soviet Union. And only one friend of mine did something cool while being in military. He managed to get into the airborne in воздушно-десантные силы, десантники as we call them. So he served in the southern Ukraine near the border with Romania, because their main purpose was, in case of war, is to parachute in Turkey and take control of the straits so the Black Sea can get out and start fighting in the Mediterranean. And I also need to mention that the attitude towards military service changed quite a bit, like from my parents' generation, baby boomers, to our generation. Because my dad told me that for them it was a big deal. They were proud to serve. And of course, if a girl finds out that you never served the military, she'll be suspicious there's something wrong with you, health-wise or something like that. In my generation, there was no problem to dodge the service if you knew how to do it. Good for you. And before we wrap up this video, I want to show you this picture again. So this is me on the black and white photo and my doppelganger. This picture came from the Foreign Military Review magazine. So Зарубежное военное обозрение. This magazine was published for the Soviet officers. So this shows some guy in NATO gear, but I feel like I'm looking at my own reflection. It's pretty wild that the guy looks very similar to me. But it's not me. I never served the military. Well, my friends, I think we covered the topic of military draft and military service pretty well. And once again, I want to remind you in the comments section, there'll be links to several videos that I made on this topic earlier. So once again, don't forget to like this video, share with your friends. We'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.